Welcome back to MythVision Podcast. I'm your host, Derek Lambert, and I am joined by somebody who doesn't really need an introduction. He's been on the channel several times. He has a YouTube channel called Bible and Archaeology, but I have Robert Cargill joining us again. Welcome back, brother.
Hey, Derek. Good to see you again. Good to be back.
Good to see you. Good to see you. Looks like you're doing something big here with the new insights into the Hebrew Bible. There's going to be like a conference here. Bart Ehrman seems to be hosting it, and there's all sorts of names. You're on the list here. So what will you be presenting? And people can go in the description or the pinned comment and sign up today. You help us out. We, MythVision, are affiliates of Bart Ehrman's setup here for the new insights to the Hebrew Bible. What are you doing, Dr. Cargill?
I am a big fan of Bart Ehrman. I have been all my career. I've used his stuff. And of course, as a public scholar, and he was one of the originals, right? I've just been a fan, and I want to do what I can to help out this excellent new project. So please come sign up for the whole weekend. But I will be talking about the archaeology of Genesis because there is so much of it, of course. It's kind of a misleading title. As you well know, MythVision, what we're talking about there are the claims that have been made about the archaeology of Genesis. And so that's what I'm doing, is I'm addressing the people who have made claims about the archaeology of Genesis, and then we're going to be working through that. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I think there'll be a lot of people signing up, getting ready to throw rocks at me, and then we'll go from there.
Well, I love your scholarship, but again, if you don't know who Dr. Cargill is, let me give you just a brief description. Dr. Robert Cargill is the Roger A. Hornsby Associate Professor in the Classics at the University of Iowa. He is a scholar of Jewish and biblical studies, archaeologist, author, and digital humanist. His research interests include Second Temple Judaism, literary criticism of the Hebrew Bible, Old Testament and the New Testament, Qumran and the Dead Sea Scrolls, pseudepigrapha and apocrypha, and issues concerning contemporary politics, science, and religion. He teaches courses in the biblical studies, Second Temple Judaism, archaeology, and ancient languages, including biblical Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. A literally jack of all trades here, okay? His recent books, well, I don't know how recent at this point, but still, Melchizedek, King of Sodom, How Scribes Invented the Biblical Priest King, and that's a 2019.
Yeah.
And the one that's going to be around this lecture series you're going to be doing is The Cities That Built the Bible, which I love so much. He's also a public-facing scholar, so go subscribe to his YouTube channel, Bible and Archaeology. So, Dr. Cargill, I got 6 questions. I figure it might turn into 7 if you have the time, but
yeah, let's hit it.
Apologists frequently treat the Tel Dan Stele as a slam dunk historical confirmation of the biblical Davidic dynasty. You've explained that the inscription is complex and limited in what it can prove.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through what the Stele actually shows, what it doesn't show, and how apologists oversell its significance?
Yeah, this is a fun one. And my advisor, Bill Schneidewin at UCLA, wrote one of the early arguments for this, published one of the best articles I've read, early articles on it. We need to remember that prior to the discovery of the Tel Dan inscription, there were a lot of scholars who said that David didn't exist. King David was completely fabricated, just like King Solomon. Didn't exist. And it wasn't until you got down to the 9th century, Ahab, Omri, that you had evidence, archaeological evidence, which is absolutely true. You have evidence for these guys archaeologically. But David was a fabrication. And then you found in Tel Dan this inscription in reuse, face down, that has this reference to the king of Israel and to the Beit David. And this made a lot of people really upset who had been arguing against the existence of a historical David. And they tried to say, no, this is a Beit Dod, the house of my uncle or something, stuff like, but no, it's a reference to the house of David. And so a lot of people said, no, look, evidence of David, that David existed. What's actually going on here is this is an inscription made about 150 years later by an Aramaic king. It's written in Aramaic, and it's basically as ancient kings and dictators are wont to do. They're bragging about their military exploits. And this happens. Basically, all of these monumental inscriptions are big boasts about, things that I've done. And he's bragging about having defeated the king of Israel and the house of David. So what you actually have is not an autograph, the house of David, right, from the 10th century. From 150 years later, roughly, you've got a reference that this people that this Aramean king defeated referred to itself as the house of David, or the dynasty of David, the children of David. Now, does that mean that David existed? Not necessarily, but it's a good circumstantial case that you had a group of people that referred to themselves, Judah, this is a reference to Judah, as the house of David, the descendants of David. So it's not that slam dunk, but it's a pretty good case that they refer to themselves as the descendants of David.
It's safe to say, as we move on to the next question, we should probably reserve any overconfidence in either direction at this point and just wait for more data. Or
I always say, if you've got something, it had to come from somewhere, right? If you've got the chicken, it had to come from an egg. So if you've got something in the 9th century, it had to come from something that came before. So if you've got a full blown, if you've got an army that you defeated in the 800s, it probably came from something that preexisted that. And then the question is, how far can you string that back? And that's where the debate is.
Gotcha. Okay, very interesting. I imagine there's much more that can be done. I've even had some scholars try to dismiss the Tel Dan inscription as potentially iffy. Anyway, so I know most scholars don't do that. But what's your thoughts?
That was an early thing. Oh, this was salted, except they went back the next year and found the other half of it, the other piece of it. So,
okay.
And that was with a lot of scrutiny. So I completely dismiss claims that this was salted, that this was a forgery. That's pretty much been dismissed.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Second question. Despite decades of archaeological consensus following Kathleen Kenyon's work, apologists still push the idea that Jericho's walls fell in Joshua's time. Why do you think Jericho remains a favorite apologetic talking point? What does the actual stratigraphy and radiocarbon evidence reveal that flatly contradicts the biblical conquest narrative?
This is the great question. I'll give you the answer to the first part without getting too technical into the second part, but Jericho is the story, right? It's the first place they conquer going in. And secondly, it's the story that some people are familiar with right? Some people are familiar with some of the other conquest narratives, but Jericho is the story, right? Everybody knows that story. And it's the first one. The problem is, of course, what we learned from Dame Kathleen Kenyon's excavations is that Jericho was likely, again, she went there and did this, right? It was probably already destroyed by the time a historical Israel would have come in at the time the Bible says they would have come in. So what's more likely to have happened is the destruction of Jericho was incorporated into the conquest narrative and was credited to the Israelite deity. It was credited, again, a lot of scholars don't accept, most archaeologists don't accept an exodus, don't accept a desert wandering. And they, of course, then don't accept a conquest narrative where they came in, divided and conquered and destroyed all these cities. And so when she did this archaeology, she said, you look at the excavation, it was already destroyed. It certainly wasn't destroyed at the time that the Israelites would have come in. Now, subsequent to this, any number of people have gone in to try to second guess this, do more tests and more excavations and look at this some more and to try to say this cannot be right. In fact, there are organizations that say on their website as part of their mission statement, their founding statement, we believe that the Bible is the inerrant, infallible word of God, and that any archaeology that disagrees with what the Bible says fundamentally must be wrong. And it's our goal to go out and to say why this is wrong, and we will work to. So they're not scientists, right? They're not archaeologists. They're apologists. And so they're going to just go out and try to nibble away, try to undermine, try to do anything they can to try to get published anything that they can that undermines good, credible archaeology that's been done over time. And if they can find something and here and look at this might be, that's what they're doing. So they'll try to get as technical as they can to try to undermine this. Jericho was already gone by the time they came in. And so this has become a new popular thing, is to go back and revisit Jericho, because it's the story. If Jericho can be questioned, then you can go back and question everything else. And that's what's going on.
Just to wrap that one up with your book, I like what you've done with this entire issue. You let the data speak based on what the evidence is. And then if you go, okay, well, and I'm just, correct me if I'm wrong, or give elaborate, or maybe say, hey, you're right. We now know there's no way at the time that was the case based on the evidence. Okay, right. So then why tell the story, right? So why does a story exist? Which is why cities that built the Bible. And It's like, you're now looking at it going, maybe they saw ruins, and maybe someone's crafting up a narrative. Maybe someone thinks that this is what happened, and they create an imagined history for how their peoples came to be. What are your thoughts?
There were stories that were popular in antiquity. There were just stories that were popular. So if you're an ancient scribe, if you're an ancient historian, right, and you're ancient Israelite, ancient Hebrew historian, you can't necessarily just dismiss these stories because they're well-known folk legends. And so you can't just dismiss them. So the other solution is to incorporate them, to acquire them, right? To take them and then to adapt them into your story. We see this with the legend of Balaam the prophet, right? We have archaeological evidence. We have the Der Allah inscription there in Jordan of this prophet named Balaam that apparently had prophecy, the prophet who sees and who he talks about these deities, and we have it there in the red letters on the wall, on the plaster at Der Allah. There was apparently this prophet running around in the region. So what do? You can just ignore it, but somebody might ask, what about Balaam? He was a prophet, wasn't he? So they incorporated this Balaam into the story in Numbers. So you have this great story of Balaam and Balak and the talking donkey, right? And the third oracle. And that's where you get this famous Aaronic blessing, right? You get this in Numbers, in this same stories, you get this blessing that we end up getting on the Ketef Hinnom inscription. So what they would do is they would take these inscriptions that they knew about from the 7th century, from the 6th century, and they would take these legends about Balaam and they would craft them into a narrative about the Israelites coming in, or about, wanderings in the desert. And they would weave them into stories. They take the song of the horse and rider they've thrown into the sea, and they'd craft them into the Exodus story. They bring the 10 Commandments and the receiving of the law, and they'd weave that into the Exodus narrative and the wanderings in the desert. That's how you craft a good story. That's how you craft a good foundation story.
Thank you. There's so much there. Yeah. That's amazing. Dr. Cargill, one of the most overlooked areas in biblical archaeology is how the very geographic names of regions preserve the memory of earlier gods and myths that predate Israelite religion. Places like Jerusalem, which you're the one who brought this to my attention, and I'd love to hear more on this, Horon, or depending on how you want to spell it, Horan or Haran, and others often carry vestiges of older deities, even though later writers try to create new folk etymologies to sanitize those origins. Right. Can you explain how place names across the Levant and Mesopotamia preserve these earlier divine or mythic layers, and give us a few concrete examples of where older gods still haunt the maps without most people ever noticing?
Yeah, this is a great question, Derek. Thanks. I spend a lot of time doing the Jerusalem one, and it's because I deal with Shalem, right? Because I'm dealing with the Shalem argument as part of my Melchizedek research. By the way, Volume 2, the reception history of Melchizedek, is coming. It's almost done, and it's on its way. It's what I've said I was going to. I'll have it out in 2 years, and then you start doing administrative stuff within a university, and you start doing YouTube, and so it gets slowed down, but it's on its way. What you see in a lot of these names, by the way, a lot of them are theophoric names, meaning it's got the name of a deity implanted in the name, and you get them in paeans, right? In personal names. They could be the name of a city, or they can be the name of a person. The classic example within a personal name is the Ishboseth, Ishbaal name that we get changed. This was a son of Saul, I believe, with David and Saul. Sometimes you have these names, and you see it a lot with Baal. They don't want the name of Baal preserved in these places, so they will just change it to El, or they'll change it to Yah, or they'll change it to Boshet, right, to shame. So instead of saying the son of Baal, it'll be the son of shame, or something like that, man of shame. In the place names, what I argued with Jerusalem was that we know Jerusalem's name from much earlier than when the Israelites laid claim to the city. So we have early Egyptian execration texts. We have Amarna letters that always have this place as Urushallimu, or it's a very long name. And you have this determinative that says that it's this city, and it's probably the city of Shalem. It was probably dedicated to the deity Shalem. And so you have this reference to this deity of Shalem. And then over time, it gets turned around. We don't want it to be a deity of, you don't want it to be a city of this other deity. So we'll just make it the generic concept of peace. Right. But it's still the city of Shalem, right? It's Urushallimu. Up in the north, next to Shechem, you have a city called Shalem. And in the biblical text, you have in the Pentateuch, you have all these stories about Abram going up into Shalem. You have Jacob going into Shalem. And you have all of this affinity towards Shalem. And what happens is, in Genesis 14, you have this king of Shalem who's coming out and doing this. And they need to first remove Abram from his dealings with Sodom, so they take care of that. But then Shalem is a well-known city up in the north, and Jerusalem's name was always very long, Urushallimu. So what they did later on is they came up with a legend that Shalem was just a nickname, a short version of Jerusalem, of Urushallimu. And so, see, this guy is actually from Jerusalem, and see, Abraham tithed to him, so you should too. And this is what's going on, is they take the deity out and they say it's just peace, right? They do this with the gods all the time, right? Yam used to be the god of the sea, and now it's just the sea, the Hebrew word for the sea. Mot is the god of death. Now it's just the concept of death. So they do it with deities. They do it with deities in personal names. They do it with deities in place names. And so Mark Smith is the one who talks about this, how these ancient deities, these many, many deities, basically get conflated into the singular Israelite deity. And they do it with the names of gods and the attributes of the Hebrew God, but you also see it happening with place names and with personal names.
Thank you so much. Look, The next one is a follow-up to the point about ancient place names preserving memories of older gods. Yeah. And this is an interesting thing. This might be a bit of a curveball. A lot of the scholars I've asked aren't aware of this or don't have really any thoughts yet. But I'm curious whether you've engaged with the argument by Mauro Korpel and Johannes de Moor in their book, Adam, Eve, and the Devil, A New Beginning. Mm-hmm. They argue that Genesis preserves echoes of an older Canaanite myth in which El and Asherah dwell in a garden on the slopes of Mount Ararat, the divine mountain where the gods assemble. in their reconstruction, the first cosmic rebel isn't human, but the god Horon, which that geographic location, Horon,
Right.
who is thrown down from Mount Ararat after attempting to depose El. Horon then appears as a serpent figure who corrupts the tree of life. What do you think of this comparative approach to Genesis's earliest layers? And isn't it fascinating that we still have that region today called Horon, seemingly preserving the memory of this old deity? In your view, how seriously should we take hypotheses like this when mapping the deeper mythological background behind the Adam story?
It sounds fascinating. I am not familiar with this argument, so I'm going to withhold any judgment on it. I will say that if I remember correctly, I have it in a note here, in the Utnapishtim Gilgamesh story, at the end of that, Utnapishtim tells Gilgamesh that there's a thorny plant of rejuvenation at the bottom of a lake, and that if he swims down and gets this plant of rejuvenation, I think the word is an old man grows into a young man plant. That's what it literally is. If you eat of this plant, so it's a parallel to the tree of life, you won't grow old. You can keep. And he swims down and is able to bring this plant up, but he's so exhausted, he passes out on the shore, but he has the plant. And it's a serpent that comes and steals the plant and takes it. And we know that the serpents live forever because they keep shedding their skin. And so it's this kind of etiology for why that happens. Now, I don't know if that has anything to do with this, but we know that we have these parallels that get incorporated into these stories. If that is part of the Haran narrative, I don't know, but I'm not familiar with this particular thing, and I'll withhold any judgment on it. It sounds intriguing. I'd love to go read it.
I think you'll like it.
The name of the book again?
Yeah, Adam, Eve, and the Devil by Maro. So it's Marjo, Korpel, Korpel, and Johannes de Moor, Johannes, and then De Moor.
And it's about Haran.
It's really interesting because the character, the main mortal in the story is Adamu, and I was looking at it. A lot of scholars think Adamu was a feminine figure in a lot of cases, but in some rare cases, Adamu was a male figure in some of the ancient stories, and Adamu plays the male figure in this. But that underworld deity Horon, who takes on the form of a serpent, ends up either biting Adamu. Somehow Adamu's trying to stop the serpent.
Yeah.
But it gets mortality strikes. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so there's a peace deal between the gods on the mountain and Horon to get rid of this. Like it's super complex.
Yeah.
It's really interesting though. Anyway.
I love these early serpent stories where the serpent steals access to the tree of life, or to immortality, if you will. I am jealous of you, man. One of the things I like about doing this job, especially the YouTube side of it, is we get to meet so many new scholars, so many new ideas, and hear these things and then chase them down. And it's one of the nice things about doing public facing scholarship. So thank you for this. I'll check this out. Absolutely.
And by the way, there are people who are critical of this. Okay,
I'm sure there are.
Oh yeah, they think that they think the reconstruction's wrong, and they think it's just a serpent snake bite spell, like a magical incantation rather than a myth. They take it as a myth. So anyway, I'll let you be scholarly.
Sure.
So I'm just going to skip to the last one. We got 6 minutes, so let me just make this. Because the Temple Mount is archaeologically sensitive and highly restricted, apologists often claim that suppressed evidence proving the Bible is literally true is being hidden or destroyed. From your expertise, what is a real story behind the Temple Mount restrictions? And how does misinformation about it fuel conspiracy-style apologetics?
Yeah, I mean, we learned this from the Dead Sea Scrolls, right? Anytime you don't publish, anytime you are taking too long to release information, it just breeds conspiracy. Now, that pendulum has swung way too far the other way, where nowadays, if it takes a half a day to release information, people, the conspiracy machine, people use conspiracy now as an excuse to promote their pre-existing beliefs. So if someone wants to argue that there never was a temple on the Temple Mount, there never was a Jewish temple, it never existed. First temple and second temple never existed. They will say, oh yeah, see, they will make that claim because, well, look, they're suppressing the evidence, right? Then they're just using this politics as we live in a world now where anybody will say anything and will use the fact that people are trying to be sensitive about the fact that the Temple Mount is a disputed territory. It's hard to do archaeology. There are holy sites up there, right? The Waqf is trying to, be sensitive to the Israelis. The Israelis are trying to be sensitive to the Waqf. There are houses built all around this place. You've got this mutually assured destruction. If anything happens to the Western Wall or to the Dome of the Rock, you've got excavations that did take place where they, now you've got this sifting project and, the provenance is messed up, but you've got all of these things that people can point at and then insert conspiracy. I think I tend to be one of these, governments aren't so good at keeping secrets. They're really not. And especially today, if we had evidence for one side or the other, that would get out. That we would know that. I think the Ark of the Covenant is gone and has been gone for a long time. I think temples get destroyed and they get knocked down pretty good. But we have evidence that there was something up there, right? We're getting these evidence that there was stuff up there. I think that you have motivations for saying that there wasn't. I think that you have motivations, political motivations for wanting to knock things down up there today that we should try at all costs to avoid. And I think we should learn to just get along with each other and please let legitimate scholars do their work. And the people that are working in and around there are trying to hire all different kinds of peoples and work and do responsible scholarship. And it's usually the people on the political fringes that are making the claims and, figuratively and literally blowing things up. And that's what we need to avoid. If you can get rid of the extremes, if you can get rid of the ideology, and you can just let science and scholarship do its thing, we'd be in a much better place.
Thank you so much for your time. Dr. Cargill, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to be in a lineup in the New Insights to the Hebrew Bible with several other scholars that I've interviewed in the past on the channel. I hope people go check that out. I mean, we've got, Joel Baden, Shauna Delansky, Dan McClellan, Megan Lewis, John Collins, Ron Hindle, Esther Mallory, Homori, David Carr, how do you pronounce her name? Is it Martin Halverson Taylor?
I don't have the list in front of me here. I'm sorry.
Okay. Sorry. I'm just trying to figure out. There's all sorts of people going to be there. Any
place where you see John Collins and Bart Ehrman, that's where I want to be. Right. That's I want to be. I've been a fan of both of them and have assigned their stuff to so many classes. So I'll probably do my thing and then I'll sit around and be a fanboy for all of their stuff. But it's good to see you, Derek. It's always great to talk to you.
You too, ladies and gentlemen, go sign up so you could sit at the feet of these brilliant scholars. They've got a standard VIP and elite access on the website. Go check it out through my link. It helps us out here at MythVision as well. Dr. Cargill, again, till I meet you in the future, I'm sure we'll be bumping into each other soon.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Derek, good to see you.